Hello guys, this is Pash. In this video, I'm going to be talking about real estate contracts. 8 elements in the real estate contract, who are the people involved in real estate contract, and what a real estate contract actually is. When it comes to buying a property, there's going to be a lot of things you're going to have to sign, a lot of important documents. But probably the most important document you're going to sign is a real estate contract. So it's important to understand what is actually in a real estate contract. This video is going to help you, give you some information on real estate contracts, so you'll be much more prepared when you buy that property. So stay tuned and we'll get right to the video. So what is a real estate contract? A real estate contract is a legally binding sales contract that defines the terms of the sale of real property. Real property could be defined as townhouse, regular house, or condominiums. There are many different names for real estate contracts, but the most common three names are real estate purchase agreement, real estate purchase contract, and a house purchase agreement. So, who are the parties involved in a real estate contract? The parties involved in a real estate contract are the home buyer, the current property owner, or the home seller, and then it's the agents that represent them. The agents that represent them are the buyer's agent, and it's also the seller's agent. What they do is they help facilitate the transaction of the sale of the property. This usually typically starts initially with the offer, then the offer gets either counter-offered or they get amended, and then once that's signed by both parties, from the home buyer and the home seller, then it's under contract. What does a real estate contract include? A real estate contract must include clear terms and details that outline the elements of a real estate contract. It also must protect both the buyer and seller throughout the length of the real estate transaction. Who signed the real estate contract? The parties involved that sign the real estate contract are the buyer and seller. There are instances where the auctioneer or real estate agent could sign on the behalf of the owner or the buyer. But unless it's clearly stated, the buyer and seller must sign the real estate contract in order for it to be legally binding. There are 8 elements in a real estate contract. The first element is property details. The contract must have clear details of the property. It should have the property address, detailed description of the property, and any encumbrances or easements that limit the use of the new property owner. The second element in the real estate contract. The second element in the real estate contract should be buyer and seller's information. It should be detailed information on the buyer's names, contact information, and also the addresses. If there are multiple buyers and they're coming in as a tenants in common or joint tenants, it should also be stated. There's also a section in the contract where the buyer and sellers can write their names, write the signatures of their names, so it could be legally binding. The third element in a real estate contract will be the purchase and price. Once the negotiations and counter offers are done and both parties agree upon the final purchase price, it should be stated in the real estate contract. In addition, the buyer's financing should also be stated in the contract, such as if they're using their own money or they're doing a down payment with a mortgage loan. Also, are they using a good faith earnest money deposit? That should also be stated. And if it is happening, then it should also be sent to a third party and be held in escrow. The third party will hold this earnest money deposit in escrow until the finalization between both parties is completed. It's important to note that unless stated otherwise, if it's not listed as a contingency, that the buyer may forfeit the right of that earnest money deposit if they decide to back out of the contract. So it's important to understand that and be wary of that to make sure you have the right contingency, so if you decide to back out, you don't lose your earnest money deposit. The fourth element in a real estate contract will be the closing date and also the closing costs. A contract will list the closing date in which the title will transfer to the buyer and they will gain possession of the property. It should also state any closing costs and who will be related to those closing costs, such as which party will have to pay the closing costs. Want to understand closing costs and who will pay those closing costs and better understand your budget. The fifth element in a real estate contract will be the property taxes. In a real estate sales contract, it should be stated that the property taxes and how much the buyer will be responsible for. If there is no statement of property taxes that the buyer is responsible for, there should be an addendum in place for after the fact. The sixth element in a real estate sales contract would be excluded items. These are items that the seller doesn't intend to sell, such as appliances and fixtures. These could be such as air conditioners, light and bathroom fixtures, heating systems, items that the seller does not want to sell to the buyer, but it has to be stated and it has to be outlined in the sales contract in order for it to be legally binding. The seventh element in a real estate sales contract will be disclosures. A seller must list any information about the property that may affect the new owner's use of it. Information could be such as lead paint. They have to disclose if the property has lead paint in it. If they have any type of wells on the property, they have to disclose that. If it has a history of methamphetamine use, that has to disclose that information. Any information that may affect the new owner's use of the property has to be outlined in the sales contract, and it has to be clearly described and stated. The final element, and the one you want to pay special attention to, would be contingencies. Contingencies are terms that both the buyer and seller agree upon, but they must be met before a property can be finalized in the transaction. There are many different types of contingencies that could happen, but the most common ones are home inspections. If there is not a proper home inspection, then the property can't be bought, and that's one of the contingencies. If there is not title insurance, which is the transfer of title ownership to the buyer, then the property can't be bought. Also, in addition, if there is not proper financing on the behalf of the buyer, then the property cannot be bought. So these are just common contingencies, but these also play very important roles in a contract, and you want to be aware of these contracts and also these contingencies that are on these contracts, just so to better prepare yourself, so you know what you're getting into when you buy that property, or you know the advantages of it, so you can get out of that transaction when you feel like, okay, these haven't been met, so now I have the right to get out of these contracts and I can get out of this property transaction. So it's just things that you want to pay special attention to and understand the contingencies that's on these contracts. Thank you for listening. Hope this video gave you a better understanding on real estate contracts. You understand the 8 elements on a real estate contract, who signs the real estate contracts, and how to properly go navigate the real estate contract. One of my final pieces of advice for a real estate contract is that make sure you read the contract first. Read the contract first. You don't want to sign anything before you read it first. Have people look over it. Have your real estate agent look over it. Have your attorney look over it. You want to make sure that you have everybody look at it. You look at it, you understand the contract, you understand what you're sending, because if you send it and you sign it and then they sign it, it becomes legally binding. So you want to make sure you protect yourself so you don't get into a property that you find out that you really didn't want, but you're forced to do it now because you're in a legally binding contract. So just my final piece of advice for you would just be make sure you read the contract and go through the process of having others read the contract too, before you get into something that you don't really want to get into. And that's the end of this video. Stay tuned for the next video. Peace.